Okay, I invite members leaving the chamber to do so as quickly and as quietly as possible as we move on to the final item of business this evening, which is a members' business debate on motion 16282 in the name of Beatrice Wishart on opportunities and challenges for Scotland's fishing sector in 2025. The debate will be concluded without any questions being put. I'd invite members wishing to participate in the debate to press the request to speak buttons now or as soon as possible. And I invite Beatrice Wishart to open the debate. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you to those who supported the motion and the debate this evening, and to everyone who provided briefings. Despite championing our world-class seafood, the Scottish Government last held a debate on fisheries in 2022. The sector makes a significant contribution to Scotland's economy and to our coastal communities. Presiding Officer, as a representative of Shetland, where fishing is of such importance economically and culturally, I cannot speak about the industry without referring to the recent sad passing of the Senior Fisheries Policy Advisor at UHI Shetland. Dr Ian Napier was a highly respected scientist and long-time supporter of Shetland's fishing industry. He made a significant contribution to it, not least with his work on the Shetland Regulating Order, which, some 25 years later, is held up as a good example of local inshore fisheries management. Ian Napier's sudden passing is mourned across the community and industry, by his friends and colleagues at UHI Shetland, and most of all by his family, and to them I extend my deepest sympathy. Presiding Officer, a recent global survey deemed fishing to be the most dangerous job in the world, and I pay tribute to all the fishermen across the UK, many of whom are in the Shetland fleet. Fishing's a way of life, with family businesses, knowledge and skills passed down from generation to generation. Fishermen are custodians of our seas, stakeholders in its well-being and invested in a sustainable future. But fishing is becoming increasingly challenging. Without those who harvest the nutritious, healthy fish, the economy and food security would suffer. Presiding Officer, I've raised numerous times my concerns about the level of Scottish Government investment in Scotland's Marine Directorate. I believe it is inadequately resourced for all that is being asked of it: fisheries protection, marine protection, renewable energy, scientific research, data gathering, all necessary for future policy making. We've seen traditional fishing areas lost to at-sea infrastructure. From the discovery of North Sea oil and gas over 50 years ago, we now have a growing renewable energy sector, with sites set to host vast swathes of offshore wind farms. Climate change is real, so too is spatial squeeze. The Scottish Fishermen's Federation stated in their briefing to MSPs, and I quote, "Successful, viable and long-standing businesses will lose access to vast tracts of the seabed where they have fished effectively and efficiently for decades. These areas have remained productive for many years but are now set to be lost to food production as they come industrialised with floating offshore wind farms where it will be practically impossible for fishing to continue due to the physical infrastructure of the wind farm." Presiding Officer, offshore wind cannot be at the expense of fishing. A transition is not just if it ends up squeezing the life out of viable fishing businesses. In October 2022, Shetland experienced serious damage to seabed telecommunication cables, impacting all aspects of island life. There's issues of safety. Hauling up a cable could result in the loss of a vessel or, worse, lives. National security is important in a volatile world where foreign powers may seek acts of disruption. So I reiterate my support for cable corridors, coordinating cables from offshore wind turbines, interconnectors and telecoms to run along designated routes. Presiding Officer, yesterday I was in Walsall, where Shetland's pelagic fleet is based. The island community is built around centuries of fishing, and it's the epitome of a successful fishing community. I heard first-hand of the impact of the Scottish Economic Link licence condition. The fish landings obligation requires pelagic vessels to land 55% of their catch at Scottish ports. If they don't, then they will have to return quota to the Scottish Government. To the uninitiated, this may seem a reasonable ask to benefit the wider Scottish economy, but when unintended consequences are not addressed, they affect the fleet, their landings and income, and ultimately the economy. Uncertainty about the future, in turn, stalls further vessel investment, delays in replacing retiring crew, or bringing in new young talent. I heard an example of what can happen in the short summer herring season. 4 pelagic processing factories operate in Scotland. Vessels that are not tied to a specific processor can find themselves vying for a time to land their catch. Waits of up to 4 days to land are not unknown, impacting the quality of the catch and a delay in returning to fishing grounds. Herring waits for no one. Steaming to Norway to land, where the price differential can be as much as £300 per tonne, can save time and money, despite the costs and environmental impact of increased fuel usage. I understand that the Scottish Government review on the impact of the amended economic link provisions is underway, and it would be helpful if the Cabinet Secretary, when replying, could indicate when that will report. In conclusion, and recognising the time constraints, there are other challenges, including the dangerous actions of other vessels at sea, including widely reported incidents with the Persorsa Dos and Antonia Maria, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, or TCA, negotiations, marine planning and marine protected areas, marine pollution, ghost gear, dumping at sea, and its impact on fish, seabirds, cetaceans and other marine life. Presiding Officer, there is so much to say, but should the Scottish Government initiate a fisheries debate within the remainder of the parliamentary term, there will be another opportunity to expand further on all of these important matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Wishart, and I echo your comments in relation to Dr Ian Napier. We now move to the open debate. I would advise members we are a bit pressed for time with the late decision time, and it is a debate that's attracted a lot of interest. So I'd be grateful if members could stick to their speaking time allocation. I call first Karen Adam to be followed by Tim Eagle. Up to 4 minutes. Ms Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank my colleague Beatrice Wishart for bringing this debate to the Chamber today. As convener of the cross-party group on fisheries and coastal communities, Ms Wishart is my deputy convener, and I know that she is really committed to this subject. It's absolutely right that we take the time to discuss our fishing sector, not just the challenges that it does face, but the solutions that we can all work towards. In 2022 alone, fishing contributed £335 million to Scotland's economy, with my constituency leading the way. Peterhead remains the UK's largest fishing port by landed weight and value, while Fraserburgh plays a critical role in both catching and processing. Buckie and many other smaller ports support local businesses and jobs that depend on a thriving seafood sector. One of the biggest concerns raised by our fishing communities is the spatial squeeze caused by offshore wind developments, subsea cables and conservation measures. The fishing industry has told me that it does understand the need for an energy transition. They see the effects of climate change in our changing seas. But this is exactly why I created the cross-party group on fisheries and coastal communities, to bring together fisheries and offshore renewables businesses, to have a space to have open discussions on this, out with formal negotiations. Offshore developers and the fishing industry must be able to coexist, and that means creating a formal framework where fishers are involved from the start, and not just as a tick-box exercise. Presiding Officer, if we want Scotland's seafood industry to succeed, we need investment in the entire supply chain, and that means ensuring our harbours and processing facilities have the infrastructure to support that growth. I welcome the investment recently announced by the Scottish Government in our harbours, and I would welcome discussions to establish a ring-fenced fisheries infrastructure fund, similar to what countries like Norway and Iceland have, ensuring our ports remain competitive in a global market. In my constituency, seafood processing is a major employer, but Brexit has made it harder than ever for businesses to recruit the workers that they need. Many relied on skilled migrant workers, and this is a crisis that threatens not just our processing jobs, but the entire seafood supply chain. The Scottish Government has consistently called for a visa scheme that works for seafood processors, but we cannot afford to wait for Westminster to listen, and I would welcome perhaps a Scottish seafood labour task force, bringing together processors, government and industry leaders to push this issue forward. We must also explore new recruitment strategies, including direct partnership schemes with key non-EU markets like what we have already for seasonal agricultural workers, and where possible we should be investing in skills training and automation to ensure the industry remains resilient. If we want Scotland's seafood industry to compete internationally, we could also consider, for example, a Scottish seafood export strategy, one that focuses on streamlining customs processes, reducing export delays and expanding markets beyond the EU. For example, Scottish seafood trade missions opening up opportunities in Asia, North America and beyond. Presiding Officer, if there is one thing that must come from this debate, it is the recognition that Scotland's fishing sector cannot be looked at in isolation. We need a whole industry approach, the full supply chain, catching, processing, exporting. These must all be considered together if we are to secure the future of the industry. A thriving fishing sector depends on a strong processing sector. A strong processing sector depends on reliable access to markets. And all of it depends on investment in our ports, our workforce and our marine space. These challenges are significant, but so are the opportunities if we all work together with a holistic approach to achieve it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I call Tim Eagle to be followed by Rhoda Grant. Up to 4 minutes, Mr Eagle.
Well, thank you, Presiding Officer. And I could just speed this up by saying ditto, actually, to both of those speeches, which might make this quicker. But I'll add a wee bit. But my thanks to Beatrice Wishart for bringing what actually is a really vital debate. And I agree with pretty much everything that has been said about our fishing industry. I just want to start with a couple of things that I've been quite impressed with recently. One is the Scottish Fishermen's Federation's Pride in Our Seas campaign. And the other is the Open Seas, Our Seas campaign. And I took a few quotes out of the many that there were, and we saw that in an exhibition recently. One is from Colin Stephen, a skipper and a haddock trawler in Peterhead. You've got to look after the next generation. I don't know any fishermen who just think about today and forget about tomorrow. Erin Mackenzie from Mallaig says, fishing holds an integral place in coastal communities. We have to preserve generations-old skills and knowledge. Or what about Hayden Mackenzie? There's definitely a future for the fishing industry if we play our cards right. But at the same time, it's a pretty bleak future if we don't. And finally, Mark Robertson from Fraserburgh Shellfish Vessel says, solutions can be found if government work with fishermen and not against them. I guess there's only one question today, and that is to the Cabinet Secretary, isn't it? Is, can you give us some time to fully debate this, to have this full discussion about the importance of our fishing industry across the whole of Scotland? Because whether it's in Shetland, whether it's on the west coast of Scotland, whether that's in Buckie, Fraserburgh, Peterhead, this really, really matters. Now, Beatrice and Karen have already mentioned just some of the reasons why, but I'll go over them again. The Norway-UK fishing deal, the end of the trade and cooperation agreement. It'll be interesting to hear from Rhoda Grant her thoughts on that. Inshore fisheries, spatial squeeze truly is becoming such a big issue now, a real worry for our industry. The National Marine Plan and where we're going with that. We need more conversation. Landings in Scotland, local management of seas. Marine Directorate and where we are with the Marine Directorate, what facilities they need for the future, whether we're making best use of the resources they have. How are we really managing foreign-owned boats in our waters? We've got several segments of the industry. Fishing Forward is a group that I've spoken to a wee bit recently about the pressures they feel there are and the distrust they have in some of the statistics that the Scottish Government is putting out. How can we invest in great projects like Fraserburgh, Peterhead, Ullapool, Shetland, all that would love to see expansion? What about ghost fishing and black fishing, illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing? And Karen Adams makes a very good point about the processing sector. Now, I hear there might be new markets in the Middle East, but we need to have that discussion in this Parliament, in this chamber, so that we can make sure that the Government and the Parliament is fully behind everybody. I've been trying to get to the bottom of concerns my constituents raise with me. And I've mentioned that statistics not being right, and I've been sent videos of unreported, unmonitored landings and transshipping at sea, and boats not meeting their economic ties, which Beatrice brought up. But we need time. I can't do all of this in 4 minutes. We have to have more time. And that's why I really hope the Cabinet Secretary can give us the assurance today that the Government will give time to this important debate. Because if we come together, if we get behind the great value of our primary industries, if we work towards practical, reasoned rules and regulations, if we rightly allow ourselves to make the most of our seas, and for that matter our land, we can build communities which are strong and resilient. So please, let the Government take the initiative, let the Government take the lead, so that we can all show that fishing matters to all of us in Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Eagle. I've encouraged members not to bring their speeches in on time by cutting the surnames from other members, but that aside, I commend you coming in on time. Rhoda Grant to be followed by Ariane Burgess. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I want to thank Beatrice Wishart for securing this members' debate and indeed for her fitting tribute to Dr Ian Napier, and I would also wish to send my condolences to his family. Presiding Officer, I recently had the privilege of hosting our Open Seas exhibition in the Parliament and the reception as well. And it was clear from that, and indeed from speaking to the fishing community through the Highlands and Islands, how disengaged the industry feel from decision makers. Bailey Dacker, who was part of the exhibition, summarised a lot of the feeling around decision making when he said, "I don't feel like I have a say in the decisions made about the sea, but I'd like to. A lot of the decisions by government aren't taking into consideration the fishermen's thoughts at the moment. If I were able to make one request of political decision makers, it would be to come and ask us young fishermen, whatever you manage right now, the likes of myself and my mates don't even hear about anything or get asked any questions about what we think about this. We just see it happening and we have to adapt to it." And this has to change. But as is testament in the motion, highlighting the lack of government debate on fishing, fishing appears to be very low in the priority when it comes to government. And I know the fishing community were keen on Brexit, thinking that being outside the EU would deal with many of the issues they faced. But sadly, this has not been the case, and there is now even less focus on fishing. The Rural Affairs and Islands Committee recently visited the marine laboratories in Aberdeen, and frankly, we had all visited better-kept boat sheds in our time. The lack of investment in the laboratories and marine science was absolutely embarrassing. And we also, at the same time, see statutory instruments coming to committee to manage fishing where the data which they're based on is incomplete or simply wrong. So the fishing community are bemused about regulation that bears no resemblance to reality. And add to that the added pressure in our marine areas. Inshore fisheries are under pressure from mobile gearboats, and all are under pressure from increasing demands on the seas. Aquaculture, seaweed farming and all marine activities are also there. But there is also encroachment on their areas from offshore renewables, cables and pipelines and the like. And all this puts pressure on fishing before we even start to look at the conflict from foreign boats. And the policing of that conflict falls to the Marine Directorate seafarers. Seafarers that are undervalued and underpaid and sent to police the seas in extremely dangerous conditions. And there are many other issues we need to debate: the shape of our industry, the gear we use, how fishers can work to protect our marine environment, training, skills and investment. A members' debate simply doesn't allow the time for all these issues to be debated properly. We need government to look at the industry and beyond, and look at the ways in which we use our seas to work with the stakeholders and use their knowledge and expertise. We need a strategy for the seas that shows where we fish, the features we need to protect, where we generate energy, and the many other aspects of our marine environment. And this strategy needs to be drawn up with stakeholders, and within that we need to allow for local management so that we can farm our seas in a way that is sustainable for future generations.
Thank you. I now call Ariane Burgess to be followed by Douglas Ross. Up to 4 minutes, Ms Burgess.
Presiding Officer, I welcome the opportunity to speak about Scotland's fisheries, particularly given, as my colleague Beatrice Wishart has pointed out, the annual end of fisheries debate has disappeared from the calendar. And I would urge all parties to come together and reinstate that debate, which gives this crucial topic the public airing it deserves. I've met with fishers from Shetland to the West Coast and other parts of Scotland's coast, and I've been on board their vessels, seeing with my own eyes the dangers they face. I'm also aware of how fragile the industry is, of how it struggles to attract young people. Not only does this annual debate allow us to cover these issues, it also allows Parliament to scrutinise the government's actions. actions that have been lacking in recent times. The government seems to be content to contravene its own policy and legal obligations. For example, MSPs have been told that fisheries management is not a national or regional planning matter, when the reality is that under the Marine Scotland Act 2010 and the National Marine Plan, fisheries management is very much in scope. Government also has a legal duty to balance the need of economic actors with those of the environment, communities and other marine users. And this makes sense because neglecting any one of these elements damages the others. But it has been ignoring this legal requirement, prioritising the needs of the current extraction-based economy above all else. And this approach is not only ruining unique, precious ecosystems along Scotland's magnificent coastline, it also risks the future of the fishing industry, marine tourism and, by extension, coastal communities. The failure to view these interests as a single whole has already had a negative impact. Overfishing, harmful fishing practices, as well as a lack of effective marine planning, have fed a drastic decline in fish stocks. For example, Clyde cod, once a staple of West Coast chippies, has practically disappeared. Lacking inshore management measures and poor monitoring practices mean the safeguards intended to protect the species are all but worthless. Clyde cod continues to be caught as bycatch by trawlers, which means this unique type of cod has been unable to recover. And this sort of bad governance has also led to a steep decline in the number of fishers and fishing vessels. The government's own statistics show that in 2023 there was an 8% year-on-year reduction in the number of fishers. Most of them, more than 200, were islanders. And this is fueling depopulation in these areas, pulling families apart, damaging our nation's economy instead of bolstering it. So what can we do about it? Continuing with extraction at all costs simply isn't an option if we want our seas and our coastal populations to teem with life. What's needed is for the government to abide by the law and ensure it's working towards good environmental status whenever it makes marine decisions. We also need joined-up thinking from the government and Marine Directorate that's based on proper engagement with all of those that rely on and enjoy our seas. Inshore management urgently needs to be reformed. Marine protected areas need that protection. We need to see the low-impact fishers given the support they need to flourish. Damaging fishing practices need to be halted in areas where they lead to loss of fish stocks, and the rollout of REM monitoring measures must be sped up across all fleets. I've heard that we're short on time. I just want to conclude my points. Thank you for trying, though. We need to address all of these things and design a holistic system that works for Scotland's seas, taking inspiration from existing schemes in neighbouring countries like England's inshore fisheries and conservation authorities. Above all, we must remember that wanting the best for our marine environment underpins fishing. Our environment is essential for fishing's future.
Thank you. I now call Douglas Ross to be followed by Fergus Ewing. Up to 4 minutes. Mr Ross.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And can I too congratulate Beatrice Wishart for submitting this motion and the way she's opened today's debate, and associate myself with Beatrice Wishart's remarks and yours, Presiding Officer, to the family and friends of Dr Ian Napier, who I know was respected across this chamber and across the industry. Can I also thank all of the organisations who submitted briefings for this debate, and I think the number of briefings we had showed the interest outside the chamber to influence what MSPs say inside the chamber, and yet again reiterates the point that has been made by almost every speaker, that this should be a debate we are having in government time, not an issue that is added on at the end of the day because backbench MSPs have brought this issue forward. The fact that the government have not held a debate on fishing for 3 years, I think, is something they really need to reflect on, and is sadly indicative of this department within the Scottish Government. I think of the Rural Affairs brief, and I think we should be debating that more in this Parliament. Indeed, when we had the outrage and correct outrage from farmers across Scotland and the rest of the UK about the inheritance tax applied by the UK Labour Government. Yes, the Scottish Government did bring forward a debate on that, but a week after, Tim Eagle led a debate for the Scottish Conservatives. Again, it was opposition parties using their debating time to get the Government to discuss this issue. So I hope the Cabinet Secretary will take many things away from today's debate, but I hope we also get a guarantee that there will be a full debate in Government time to allow this issue to be discussed across Parliament and across the parties, because there are so many issues we could be focused on today. The one that I want to focus on was part of the Scottish Fishermen Federation's brief and one of the 3 issues that they highlighted in their briefing for today's debate, and that is spatial squeeze, because this is an issue that the industry and the sector are acutely aware of, but particularly worried about for the future of the sector, because they speak about the just transition to renewables, and we all want to get behind a just transition, but the industry feels like it is an unjust transition for the fishing industry. Too many long-established fishing areas are being lost for opportunities to allocate fishing grounds to the renewable sector. And we have to find a better way for the renewables industry to work with the fishing sector. And I believe the fishing sector have done an awful lot to try and accommodate what is happening in the seas and in our waters, but they are not being met part of the way by industry and, in some cases, government. And that has left them feeling really squeezed out of the fishing areas that provide us with the vital produce we need. And when people speak about renewables and offshore energy being part of the energy security, I think we have to treat food security as high a priority as energy security. And that means supporting our farmers, but also supporting our fishermen and giving them the areas to fish in to provide that quality produce we know our Scottish fishermen are rightly famed for. Spatial squeeze is something that I've worked on for some time. When I was a member of the UK Parliament, the Scottish Fair Select Committee had an inquiry on this issue, and we published a report. Sadly, our report wasn't as full as it could be because the Cabinet Secretary refused to attend that session, and I know that SNP members were disappointed that she failed to come forward. So it reiterates the point that I think the Government need to get behind the fishing industry and get involved and engaged in the sector. Finally, Presiding Officer, several members have mentioned the coastal testimonies that we heard in the reception hosted by Rhoda Grant and this book that they have provided. And Rhoda Grant did quote from Bailey Dacker from Kishorn, but I wanted to finish by quoting from him as well, because this is a young fisherman who is passionate about his industry. And he says, "Who would I say owns the sea? All of the fishermen. I don't feel I have a say in the decisions made about the sea, but I'd like to. A lot of the decisions by the Government aren't taking into consideration the fishermen's thoughts at the moment. If I were to make a request of political decision makers, it would be to come back and ask us young fishermen." We need to hear from the future generation of fishers who are so important, and I hope the Government take that on board. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. I now call Fergus Ewing to be followed by Finlay Carson. Up to 4 minutes. Mr Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I too congratulate Beatrice Wishart for her speech and her support for the fishing industry, as indeed she's following the tradition of her predecessor, Tavish Scott, who championed their interests for many a year. 4 minutes is very short, and I do agree there should be a proper debate, and if there is not, then I think that really would be a bit of a slap in the face for our fishermen. And what I wanted to say is that the challenges facing the sector now are of a very serious magnitude, and particularly in the case of some of the inshore fleets, I don't have time to address the demersal or pelagic issues, important though they are. Mr Ross has made several points I agree with, as indeed Rhoda Grant. But some inshore fleets are in a parlous state. I mean, Elaine White has told me, so far as Clyde goes, that the decline is at a tipping point. 10 years ago, there were 66 trawlers. There's now 14 active. They lost one this week, and 3 are up for sale, and many skippers are facing retirement. Sometimes we talk about fishing as if it's just been the same for forever, but the challenges it face are absolutely enormous, which is why it's so important we have more time to debate them. I think one of the key problems is that, contrary to some people's impression, large chunks of the sea are designated and can't be fished in designated areas. And I wanted to make 2 points. First of all, the method of assessing the economic impact of proposed MPAs and other designated areas is seen by fishermen as deeply flawed and completely failing to take account the magnitude of what has happened. The figures I've quoted about the declining fleet tend, I think, to give credence for that. And secondly, there should surely be a review of the efficacy of what we've done already before we go on to do even more. I mean, it's madness to create more and more designations unless we know how the existing ones are performing. And the best conservation measures are very often those proposed by the likes of Duncan McInnes and Western Isles Fishermen's Association, or Mallaig, or Clyde, or Pittenweem, or all around our coast. And I'm just talking about inshore. I haven't got time to do anything else in this particular speech. But why don't we listen more to fishermen? As Rhoda Grant has said, they do feel that they are the forgotten tribe in our rural economy, I'm afraid. So I would suggest that the Scottish Government, and it's a bit late now because you've had 4 years, I'm afraid, but there should be a review of the effect of the MPAs and an independent analysis about how we assess the economic impact, because the current system doesn't work. I'd hoped that that would have happened in my time, but we never quite got there. This strategy also, Presiding Officer, I promise I'm not planning to tear it up, not least because I wrote this particular document, but, and of course it's out of order, but Scotland's Fisheries Management Strategy was produced in 2020. It set out 12 action points. I can't go into them all now, but they're designed to promote fishing. Not regulate it, not challenge it, not ban it, not restrict it, but to promote fisheries. Now, surely 5 years into this, it's time to have a review of that. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, in the 10 seconds I've got, Scotland's fishermen are close to the heart of most people in Scotland. They're part of our DNA. They deserve our respect and they deserve our support. I hope the Minister will answer some of the points that I've made this evening.
Thank you, Mr Ewing. Whether you are ripping them up or not, props really shouldn't be waved around in the chamber. I call the final speaker in the open debate, Finlay Carson, up to 4 minutes, please, Mr
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I'd like to thank Beatrice Wishaw for bringing this debate to the chamber today. And it is indeed disappointing the Scottish Government had not held a debate on fisheries for more than 3 years. The annual debate used to be an opportunity to praise and recognise the efforts and sacrifices our fishers face as they often take to our hostile seas to put food on the table. And celebrating our fishing sector is a good enough reason for the Scottish Government to bring forward the debate, but its failure to do so also prevents this place from effectively holding them to account. The issues facing our fishing industry have been overlooked for far too long, particularly the failure to protect our inshore fishing industry. This industry is not just an economic cornerstone for many coastal communities, but also a vital part in our cultural heritage and identity. Despite the threat the industry faces, the response from the Scottish Government has been insufficient. Policies meant to safeguard and enhance our seas more often than not lack the necessary scope to be effective. The recent consultation on fisheries management measures in offshore marine protected areas included a late addition of the whole site approach, which was not part of the initial collaborative discussions, which has put a significant dent in the government industry's trust. This approach is disproportionate, offering minimal environmental benefits while imposing significant costs in the fishing sector. If this whole site approach is extended to inshore MPAs and priority marine features, it will have profound negative implications for the fishing fleet, contradicting the principle of sustainable use that was promised. The Government's sudden prioritisation of habitat restoration, including marine environments, lacks a solid evidence base and clear objectives. Restoration efforts are being rushed without proper consideration of baseline conditions, potentially and potential unintended effects, and the feasibility of projects are put at risk. This approach risks the exacerbation on the spatial squeeze on the fishing industry that Douglas Ross touched on, and prioritises theoretical impacts over scientifically validated outcomes. We need a government focused on adapting to changing environmental conditions rather than attempting to restore undefined baselines. The development of the National Marine Plan 2 is another area of concern. The existing plan, which was never properly implemented, is being replaced with a new plan that overemphasises the climate and nature crisis over socio-economic needs. This imbalance could lead to a social crisis, as the long-term importance of producing food from Scotland's seas is not adequately recognised. We must ensure that NMP2 supports sustainable fishing practices and does not impose blanket spatial management approaches that could harm the fishing industry. The Inshore Fisheries Management Improvement Project is in response to the lack of investment and robust data in managing inshore fisheries. The Cabinet Secretary is very aware of examples of failures in the current system, and last night I met with local fishing stakeholders whose livelihoods and futures are at risk, including members of the Galloway Static Gear Fishermen's Association, who I helped to force a U-turn over a misguided ban on fishing for buried hen lobsters. We also have a Cabinet Secretary who has failed to act on a potential multi-million-pound boost for the economy of Dumfries and Galloway from a boat-based cockle fishery. Independently verified stock assessments, impact assessments, RSPB approval, compliance and funding models have all been delivered on a plate to the Marine Directorate, but they've turned a blind eye to this opportunity because it's not a national priority. Well, the good people of Galloway will not forget they're being told that they're not a priority when it comes to the next election, I can assure you. In conclusion, I realise the time. The Government's current approach does undermine the fishing industry's sustainable and the trust they have between government and industry. They must prioritise collaboration and evidence-based decision-making and the long-term viability of the fishing sector and its policies. Presiding Officer, Skipponish, a band famous for its anti-HPMA protest song, The Cleanest Again, captures the spirit of coastal life. They poignantly remind us that the sea is our lifeblood, our heritage, our home. Their lyrics resonate deeply with the current plight of our inshore fishermen who are witnessing their livelihoods being eroded. Let us honour this heritage by ensuring that the policies that we make reflect the importance of preserving our inshore waters.
Thank you, Mr Carson.
Thank you.
I now invite Marie Goujon to respond to the debate. Cabinet Secretary, around 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And I think, first of all, I just want to start off with associating myself with the comments that were made by Beatrice Wishart and others about Dr Ian Napier, and really just want to extend my sympathies and condolences to his family and, of course, all of those who worked with him. And also want to thank Beatrice Wishart for her comments and for bringing this motion forward, as well as to colleagues more widely for their contribution to the debate this evening. Now, Scotland's fishing industry, as Beatrice Wishart outlined, of course, it's so vital for our economy, but it's also ingrained in our national identity. And it's a hugely significant aspect of our economic, social and cultural fabric of Scotland's rural and coastal communities. Now, one of the Government's chief priorities is to drive economic growth, and fishing in our wider seafood sector is a critical part of that as part of our diverse marine economy. Now, the range of issues that have been covered in the debate today, I think, really do speak to some of the complexity and the diversity of our marine sector that exists there at the moment. So I do think it's important to take stock and reflect on one of Scotland's most important assets, which is our fishing industry, the people and communities who make a living from it, and its valuable contribution to the Scottish economy. I do just want to pick up on some of the points that were made by members across the chamber tonight. Now, first of all, I know that both Beatrice Wishart and Tim Eagle have raised the budget issues, and I know that when we were undertaking the budget scrutiny, the Rural Affairs Committee focused on the Marine Directorate, and I welcome the scrutiny that was undertaken in relation to that. Now, we did cover at length during those committee sessions the issues in relation to some of the particular issues that we have in relation to the marine estate there, and I outlined there that there is a programme board that is taking forward work in relation to this, both to address the immediate issues as well as looking to the medium and longer term. And of course, we have also set out in our indicative portfolio allocations within the budget. We've included within that an increase to the science budget, which I know the committee was concerned about too. So I hope that that shows that we have listened and we are trying to address the concerns that were raised, and recognising how important that part of the portfolio is. Now, turning to another key point that other members have raised today, and largely in relation to the debate. I'm more than happy to commit to having a debate on fisheries and scheduling government time for that. I appreciate we're always short of time when it comes to members' business and debates. But I would just want to pick up on a couple of points in relation to that. First of all, we did have an interim statement, of course, in relation to the autumn negotiations, but as I've just outlined, I'm more than happy to consider reinstating that debate. And especially in light of, I think, just as members have outlined and in their contributions this evening, as we see from the variety of different issues that have been raised, there is so much going on in our marine environment at the moment, and I know much which is concerning our wider fishing industry. But one thing I would want to highlight, though, that there is so much work going on within the Marine Directorate in relation to all of the issues that we're facing in our marine environment at the moment. And I do think it's important just to reflect and I think recognise some of the work that takes place and to see some of the examples of that. So when you consider in relation to the work that our negotiating teams undertake, our approach to our annual fisheries negotiations is, of course, informed by the best available science. It takes into account the scientific advice, other socio-economic factors and the dynamics of fisheries. And our negotiators have played an active role in the UK delegation throughout the negotiations last year, acting as that constructive partner, and they're always seeking to do the best for Scottish interests within those discussions. And I think it's really important to highlight the financial impact of that, where those efforts generated opportunities that were worth over £600 million for Scotland in 2024. And on that as well, I think it's important to recognise on sustainable fishing, which I think was a point that had been raised by Ariane Burgess. It's important to reflect on that when you look at the figures that we have in the Scottish Sustainable Fishing Indicator, that summarises the sustainability status of commercial fish and shellfish stocks in Scottish waters. And that shows that the status has increased through time from 37% in 1993 to 20% in 2022. I think our fishers undertake such an important role. More widely, I think the point about our food security was raised in relation to that. And of course, it's within everyone's best interest that we protect our marine environment. But I think I do just want to touch on a number of other key points that were raised today. I think Beatrice Wishart touched on issues in relation to the economic link. We are due to publish a report this spring, so I'm more than happy to follow up in direct relation to that. Karen Adam touched on some really important points there about the wider importance of, well, our fishing industry, but the wider seafood trade on the back of that. And you only have to look at our export statistics to see that seafood trade was worth over £1 billion in exports in 2023. But of course, there are issues there too in relation to the wider employment and the workforce that we have been trying to address at length with the UK Government. And I hope that the new UK Government will listen to us and finally try and work with us to address the concerns and actually try and find some solutions. And I know that this is an issue that Karen Adams' constituent Jimmy Buchan has been really passionate about and certainly put a lot of work into. Now, another key item that I really do want to touch on just before we close the debate today, and another one that I know the SFF has raised and that is of significance to members across the chamber, is of course the competition that exists for marine space and the pressure from potential restrictions in the space for fishing activity. Now, effectively managing how we use our marine space is obviously going to be critical as we transition to net zero by 2045. And this government is committed to maximising the opportunities that come with a blue economy approach and what that can deliver for our environment, our marine sectors, but also our rural and coastal communities too. Now, as we develop the National Marine Plan 2, we are adopting that approach, one that is considering our marine economy, our local communities and the environment. And that will ultimately, I think, and I hope, get us to the right planning framework in place so that we can address that increasing competition that exists. And just to touch on, I know that a few members also tonight raised the point about young fishers and people who feel like they're not part of that conversation. I would say that we are making strong efforts to try and address that by trying to engage with young fishers, especially as we are going through this National Marine Plan 2 process, because of course this is about their future. Now, in drawing to a close, presiding officer, of course, every day Scotland's fishing fleet put themselves at no little risk in the front line to ensure that we can all benefit from outstanding healthy produce that's important not only to our rural economy but as well as our national culture, as we've heard this evening. Now, I had no hesitation in signing the Scottish Fishermen's Federation Pride in Our Seas campaign pledge to protect and support Scotland's vital fishing industry and coastal communities, because this government values and appreciates all who make a living and who care about our seas. Yes, there are challenges, but that's why I'm determined to continuing to work with our industry as we look to address them. Thank you.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes the debate and I close this meeting of Parliament.